Haiti, 1802. You are a French soldier advancing on the city of the Cap. Bullets whiz past your head and the roar of cannon fire fills the air. You were told that the former slaves were weak and no match for the might of France. Yet they are fighting like men possessed, making you pay for every step you take towards Le Cap. You are almost at the gates when they suddenly open and the defenders charge towards you. All around you is chaos as the fighting becomes hand-to-hand, machete versus bayonet, gunshots at point-blank range. You see a man charging towards one of your friends with a machete. You shoot him, but he doesn't even seem to feel it. Your friend screaming as he has run through. You avenge his death with a thrust of your bayonet, but you are stunned by the sheer fanatical courage the black soldiers are showing. You smell burning and see the flames appearing above the walls. They have set fire to the city. Finally, you drive them off as they flee towards the mountains. The city is yours. You charge along with your comrades into the fiery holocaust to save what you can of Le Cap. Then the world explodes. You dive for cover as shrapnel and splinters smash into your fellow French soldiers. When the dust finally clears, you struggle to stand and look at the devastation around you. The former slaves kept their promise to destroy the greatest city in Haiti rather than surrender it. This was meant to be an easy conquest. How can you defeat such men? I'm your host James Barton, and this is Forgotten Wars.
This country is at war with Germany.
Eagle 1, first strike, you have permission to engage the target.
First few hours after our servicemen went to the rescue of young Americans and of democracy in Grenada.
Hello everyone. Apologies that this episode has been delayed. I've had a bad cold, still recovering from it, and still sound a bit croaky as you can probably tell. But let's get into the good stuff now. In 1790, the modern nation of Haiti was a French colony called Saint-Dominique. For simplicity's sake, I will call it by its modern name in this podcast. Haiti was the jewel in the crown of the French Empire, an island producing such wealth as to satisfy even the greediest person. Yet from 1791 to 1804, the island would be consumed by revolution, violence and war. The biggest slave revolt in history broke out. Spanish and British invasions would be defeated. Then, finally, France would return in force to reconquer and impose slavery once again. Haitians would win their freedom in the world's only successful slave revolt, but the island would be shattered almost beyond repair. Much of modern-day Haiti's problems with violence and poverty can be traced back to this period. First, let's set our scene. Our story starts with Christopher Columbus sailing the ocean blue back in 1492. Have to admit, I do love that poem. He would discover a large Caribbean island that he would name Hispaniola and claim it in the name of Spain. Spain would rule the entirety of this island until its power began to decline. Then France seized the western portion for themselves. The French portion of the now divided island became Haiti. Now, mind map time. Haiti resembles a reversed crescent moon. In the south, there is the commercial capital or Port-au-Prince. To the north, there is the Cap, France's main military base. To the west was the Spanish-ruled portion of the island, Santo Domingo. To the east, across the sea, was Spanish Cuba and British-controlled Jamaica. The Caribbean at this time was the epicenter of the Western economy. This was due to the white gold of the age: sugar. The plantation owners of Haiti and the merchants of cities such as Bordeaux in France were the new super-rich of their age. If you're looking for a modern-day comparison, think of today's tech titans. At the centre of all this wealth was Haiti, the jewel of France's empire and the most prosperous European colony in the whole world. Behind this prosperity, however, was a nightmarish reality. Haiti's prosperity was built on the cruelest slave society in the Caribbean. As one visitor said, Haiti was a land of the cracking of the whips, the smothered cries, and the indistinct groans of the slaves, who never see the day break, but to curse it. Life expectancy for a slave was just 1 year. Into this powder keg came the French Revolution in 1789. As so many ships from France regularly arrived in Haiti, the locals were surprisingly well informed about every twist and turn of the revolution. Just like France, the colony descended into revolution as different factions fought for control. While the white community were distracted, however, among the majority slave population, ideas about liberty, freedom, and overthrowing oppressors were beginning to circulate. These ideas combined with a new religion that had been birthed on Haiti, a mixture of Christianity and the religions of West Africa, Voodoo. At torchlit ceremonies deep in the bush, Voodoo priests preached revolution. Let us head to one such ceremony at Bois Carmen in 1791. Lightning fills the sky. The winds howl around you, and the flaming torches flicker. It is as if nature understands that history is being made tonight. Your fellow slaves chant around you, reaching a crescendo as the man who will be your savior sacrifices an animal. He is a huge figure. He towers above you all, with a fire in his eyes that is almost otherworldly. Fitting for a powerful voodoo priest who is at one with the spirits. The blood from the animal is put into a drink and passed around for all to sip. Then, in a deep, rumbling voice, he speaks. The God of the whites pushes them to crime, but he wants us to do good deeds. But God, who is so good, orders us to vengeance. He will direct our hands and give us help. Throw away the image of the God of whites who thirsts for our tears. Listen to the liberty that speaks in all our hearts. You are in ecstasy along with the rest of the crowd. The hour of liberation, the hour of vengeance is here. After tonight, nothing will ever be the same again. A former slave turned voodoo priest called Dutty Brookman emerged, preaching revolt. At the ceremony we just visited, his followers swore an oath to revolt and throw off their chains. The rebellion spread like wildfire as hundreds of thousands of former slaves rampaged across Haiti. White planters were dragged from their homes and shot. Young children were impaled on the ends of bayonets and carried at the heads of the slave armies. Within days, 2,000 whites were dead and over 1,000 plantations put to the torch. The whites struck back in a brutal counter-offensive, killing 15,000 in an orgy of violence. Bookman was captured and his head cut off to show his followers that he was only human, rather than a voodoo spirit as he claimed. The island descended into utter chaos and race war. With Bookman dead, another would rise to take his place as leader of the revolt, a man the French would come to call the Black Spartacus, after the famous slave revolt leader in Roman times, Toussaint L'Ouverture. Toussaint is described as homely, short and small-framed. The only thing that really stood out were his eyes that seemed to gleam with intelligence. It was his intelligence that had been noticed by his masters at a young age, and he had been educated to a high standard for a slave. Winning their favour, he worked his way through the ranks and showed an astonishing capacity for hard work. Soon, he had become a steward of their plantation and was freed. Marrying a still enslaved woman and having 2 children, he seemed to be something of a black success story in a society with very few such examples. When the slaves revolted, he didn't know what to do, deciding first to help his former plantation master escape. Picture this. You are riding through the Haitian bush at night, a cloak pulled around you tightly to hide your white skin. If the rebels were to find you, just being white, let alone a plantation owner, would be enough to guarantee a painful death. Riding ahead of you is Toussaint, your steward, leading you to the safety of Le Cap and its large French garrison. Without him, you would probably be dead already. You pass a burning plantation mansion that you recognize. It belonged to a man you've done business with in the past. You wonder if he got out in time before the slaves ransacked it. Up ahead you see a motley gang of former slaves approaching, armed with machetes and looted rifles. "Halt!" one of them shouts. "Friend or foe?" You clutch the cloak tightly around yourself, praying it is too dark for them to notice your colour, while Toussaint laughs and shouts, "Friend, of course, brother. We are looking for our former owner. There are scores to settle." They laugh. "Good luck with your hunt, then." As they pass by, a large man with a bloody machete stares at you suspiciously, squinting at you through the darkness. Your heart is beating so loud you fear he will hear it, but then he shrugs his shoulders and walks off. That was too close. Finally, you see the lights of Le Cap. You beg Toussaint to come with you to the safety of the city, but he just says, "My place is with my people," and rides off back the way you came. You wonder if you will ever hear of him again. Rising rapidly through the rebel ranks due to his skills as a general, Toussaint would drive out the French, defeat a joint Anglo-Spanish invasion, and conquer the whole island, uniting it for the first time since the French conquest of the western regions. In just 11 years he had gone from plantation steward to sole ruler of the entire island. Toussaint reigned supreme, yet just as he seemed all victorious, the gaze of France turned back to Haiti. France had been too distracted by the revolutionary wars in Europe to worry about reclaiming their wayward colony. But by 1801, that had begun to change. First Consul Napoleon Bonaparte had seized power, and peace had broken out in Europe. Peace may have temporarily broken out, but the restless and ambitious Corsican was still determined to expand both France's empire and his own influence. However, empire building requires money, something he was short of. Haiti had once been the golden goose of France. If it was pacified again, and the money started flowing, he would have all the resources he would ever need. Former planters whispered in his ear and fed these dreams of empire, with even Napoleon's wife Josephine joining in. She had inherited a massive plantation on Haiti and wanted to reclaim it, so she too lobbied him to invade. Napoleon himself later said, "I believe that Josephine had some influence on that expedition. Not directly, but a woman who sleeps with her husband always exerts some influence over him." We forget that pillow talk can sometimes change history. Napoleon also seems to have disliked Toussaint, dismissing him as a gilded African strutting around in fancy uniforms. Many historians attribute this dislike to racism, and I certainly believe that played a role, but I also think Napoleon recognised much of himself in Toussaint. Both had come from humble backgrounds, both military geniuses, both had risen to power through revolution and war. Napoleon didn't like to share glory with anyone. Maybe Toussaint was just too similar for comfort. The army Napoleon would send across the Atlantic was a formidable one, 30,000 strong and filled with battle-hardened veterans from the Army of the Rhine. At the time, it was the largest expeditionary force yet assembled by France. Yet even now, the seeds of failure were being sown. The leader of the army would be Napoleon's brother-in-law, General Charles Leclerc. One of Napoleon's most sycophantic followers, he was derisively known as the Blonde Napoleon, as he not only looked like the first consul, but deliberately mimicked his mannerisms and style of dress. He was such good friends with Napoleon that when the first consul caught him in, shall we say, an intimate moment with Napoleon's sister Pauline, he congratulated the pair and clapped him on the shoulder and said they would have a drink when he was finished. Something very French about that reaction. In fact, Napoleon decided that Leclerc should marry her, sending an order for him to wed his sister, along with his commission to lead the Haitian expedition. Napoleon was just as obsessed with interfering with his family and friends' private lives as he was with war or statecraft. Perhaps to make up for Leclerc's deficiencies, his second-in-command was someone with plenty of experience of fighting slave revolts in the tropics, Donatien Rochambeau. While experienced, Rochambeau would also prove a huge mistake. He was an ardent white supremacist and hated the former slaves. Under his direction, the campaign would descend into an attempt at genocide, which would unite all of the island against the French. Napoleon's plan was also deeply flawed. The French were to offer false promises to the slaves until they had landed and taken control of key points. Then Toussaint and his two top generals, Jacques Dessalines and Henri Christophe, would be rounded up and shot. Finally, slavery would be reintroduced. All in just 3 months. As we will find, Napoleon had underestimated both Toussaint and the sheer resistance any attempt to reintroduce slavery would bring. Just a quick introduction to Christophe and Dessalines, as they will play very important roles ahead. They could not be more different from each other. The mixed-race Christophe had been freed before the Revolution, and had actually owned the best hotel in Haiti. Urbane and educated, he had even served in the American Revolution on the side of the colonies. Dessalines was very different. A field-hand slave freed by the Revolution, he was uneducated but an amazing general. His brutal treatment as a slave had put a darkness in his heart, though. Whether fighting against the French or for them, he would commit massacre after massacre. Only Rochambeau could rival him for sheer murderous brutality in this war. The invasion got off to a bad start due to Leclerc's wife, Pauline, who insisted on coming along with her husband. She managed to delay the fleet by 2 months. Treating the campaign more like a tropical holiday than an invasion, she insisted on bringing along musicians, artists, her lovers, and a small army of servants, plus her very extensive wardrobe and furniture collection. When they eventually did arrive, things did not go according to plan. Let's pay a visit. It's January 29th, 1802. Samana Bay, Haiti. You're a former slave, and across the water you can see the mighty French fleet arriving, battle flags fluttering in the wind. The other people in the crowd are terrified. The cry of, "The French have returned! The French have returned!" echoes from many mouths. For a freed slave on Haiti, there is no worse fear than the master's returning. Behind you comes the sound of horses, and a rag-tag group of cavalry races towards you. Some of the barefoot horsemen wear a mixture of blood-stained French and British uniforms, grisly trophies taken from previous failed attempts to put your people back in chains, while others look like pirates with machetes thrust through their belts and bandanas. At their head is Toussaint himself. He has changed since we last met him. Now he has 3 jagged scars running across his face, and he has taken 13 wounds in 11 years of fighting. The eyes still gleam, however, as he glares at the French fleet. Pointing at the French, he shouts to the crowd, "All France has come to Saint Dominique, and they have come to enslave the blacks." As the French troops begin landing on the beach, you can feel your courage returning. Let the French come. You will make this whole island their tomb before they force chains on you again. Le Cap, France's former military stronghold on the island, was their key first target. Surrounding the city, Leclerc demanded that, unless you surrender, 15,000 men will be disembarking tomorrow. I will hold you responsible for what may take place. Christophe, commander of Le Cap, was in no mood to parley. The French will march here only across piles of ashes, and that the ground will burn under their feet. Even on those cinders, I shall continue to fight. We have reached the scene at the start of this podcast. After vicious fighting, Christophe set fire to the whole city, starting with his own house, and including its store of gunpowder. The resulting explosion killing many Frenchmen, while the slaves escaped to the mountains. The French controlled a smouldering ruin that had once been Haiti's greatest city. Desperate to stop further destruction, Leclerc pleaded with Toussaint that, "Have no worries about your personal fortune. It will be safeguarded for you, since it has been only too well earned by your own efforts. Don't worry about the liberty of your fellow citizens either." All lies, of course, that did not persuade Toussaint one bit. Toussaint's plan was one of scorched earth, as he said in a letter to Dessalines. "We have no other resource than destruction and fire. Tear up roads with shot, throw corpses and horses in all the fountains, burn and annihilate everything in order that those who come to reduce us to slavery may have before their eyes the image of the hell which they deserve." Dessalines took him at his word. Briefly retaking the city of Legoland, after treachery delivered it into the hands of the French, he burnt it to the ground and massacred every white person who fell into his hands. One horrified French general recounted, "They heaped up bodies and left them to rot in the sun. They still had their last attitudes. They were bent over, their hands outstretched and beseeching. The ice of death had effaced the look on their faces. As a final insult to Napoleon, Dessalines personally burnt down the plantation Josephine had inherited. The French assumed that they would be facing a disorganized and badly armed rabble. In fact, Toussaint's armies were the best trained in the Caribbean, while they were surprisingly well armed due to the nearby United States' love of a good drink. Yes, that's right. Americans downed an amazing 7.5 million gallons of rum each year at this point, made mostly from Haiti's molasses. In return for a steady stream of molasses, Boston merchants armed Toussaint's followers to the teeth. After a couple of weeks, the French controlled what was left of the port cities, but in reality, the blonde Napoleon controlled nothing. Every time they ventured into the jungle interior, they were ambushed, and entire units were seemingly swallowed up by the bush. To stamp out resistance, the French prepared a massive offensive into the interior, aimed at Toussaint's headquarters. Rochambeau would lead the offensive, and boasted he would finish off the slave army once and for all. Little did he know he was walking into a trap. Picture this in your mind's eye. You're a French soldier marching through the jungle. The hot, tropical sun beats down on you, and insects chew at your skin until you swat them away. You wish you were back campaigning in Europe, not this god-forsaken island. Ahead is a deep ravine. The walls stretch far up into the sky on either side as you walk through. Suddenly you hear gunfire, and bullets slice into your column. Soldiers fall all around you, frantically taking cover behind a rock. More bullets ricochet around you. It's a trap. The slaves are sharpshooters firing from above the ravine. You return fire, then you hear a bugle. Battle cries echo around you as a wave of Toussaint's soldiers charge towards you with axes. For freedom! The officers frantically try to restore order as the fighting goes hand to hand. All the while you're being picked off by the snipers above. Things are desperate. You realise you're going to die in this land of jungle and heat. Then General Rochambeau steps forward and throws his hat into the ranks of former slaves. My comrades, you will not leave your general's hat behind. You don't know what comes over you, but suddenly you turn as one and charge the rebel lines. You are fighting like a berserker, as behind you French sharpshooters are finally killing the snipers above. The slaves fight well, but their lines finally break, and they flee into the jungle. You are too tired to pursue. The French had survived, but barely, while 800 of Toussaint's men lay dead on the battlefield. Onward the French marched towards the Haitians' final stronghold, an old British fort called Cré-à-Pierrot. 300 foot high, bristling with British cannons and surrounded by a dry moat, only 1,200 Haitians faced off against 12,000 French soldiers. The heroic resistance of the slave army has made this the most famous battle in Haitian history, joining the Alamo and Thermopylae in the ranks of legendary stands against overwhelming odds. As the French appeared before the fortress, Dessalines stood before the defenders with a lighted torch and a barrel of gunpowder. We shall be attacked this morning. All those who wish to become slaves of the French may leave the fort. Not one man moved. Then, holding the torch dangerously close to the powder keg, he cried, "I shall blow you all to glory if you let the Frenchmen into this fort." As one, the defenders shouted, "We shall die for liberty!" At dawn, the French general drew his sabre and led a wild charge against the fortress. But they fell into a trap. Hidden in a specially dug ditch were hidden slaves, who then let loose a tremendous burst of artillery and musket fire that tore the French to pieces. A second wave of Frenchmen came, but they were also driven back with huge casualties. As they retreated, the defenders cheered and threw planks across the ditch and chased the terrified soldiers. Rochambeau now joined the battle and threw wave after wave of French soldiers to their doom in human wave attacks against the walls. All the while his artillery pounded the fortress. In just one day's fighting, the French had lost 1,000 men for no gains. Day after day the fighting went on. the French cannon pounding the fort, while its troops threw themselves against its walls. During the quiet moments, the slaves would sing the patriotic songs of the French Revolution, such as the Marseillaise, both to inspire them, but also as a form of psychological warfare against their opponents. As one French officer wrote, choked with emotion, many French soldiers seemed to be questioning their role in Saint-Dominique. After 20 days of the heroic resistance, where they had held off 12,000 of the finest soldiers in Napoleon's army, the remaining 800 Haitians escaped for a surprise assault on the sleeping French troops. Rochambeau had his victory, but 2,000 of his soldiers lay dead on the battlefield. As the exhausted French camped alongside the destroyed fortress, a new horror awaited them. The sky clouded over, thunder roared, and the rains fell. From the stagnant pools of water left behind came swarms of mosquitoes that dined upon the exhausted French troops. The rainy season had come, and with it, the dreaded yellow fever the mosquitoes carried. French soldiers died in droves, stricken with a plague of almost biblical proportions. Fever cooked victims' brains until they heaved forth black vomit, their faces turning a ghoulish yellow. Leclerc frantically wrote to Napoleon to tell him of the disaster. I have already more than 1,200 men in hospital. Calculate on considerable waste of life in this country. Send reinforcements. At the current death rate, Leclerc's army would be a pile of corpses by September. Tens of thousands of reinforcements arrived, including 8,000 from the famed Polish Legion. Yet they seemed to only spread the disease. One merchant ship from Bordeaux lost 40 out of 48 crew to the fever. On another ship, the entire crew was wiped out within days except for one cabin boy. With the French seemingly on the verge of defeat, first Christophe, then Toussaint, and even Dessalines suddenly chose to surrender. What? I can hear you say. Why? Historians are divided over this. Some think they were impressed by the level of reinforcements sent by France, others that they were just tired after 11 years of hard fighting. My personal opinion is they were waiting to see where the cards would fall after the yellow fever outbreak. All three men had a history of changing sides multiple times and taking advantage of opportunities. And while they all served together, they were all rivals as well. Toussaint retired to his plantation, while Dessalines and Christophe became French officers after Leclerc promised that slavery would not be brought back. As the yellow fever descended, a kind of madness slowly began to seep into the French occupation. As their soldiers died, the officer corps lost themselves in pleasure, throwing elaborate balls and parties hosted by Leclerc's wife Pauline. She famously took so many lovers that they had to queue outside her bedroom door. Let's visit one of these balls, shall we? As you dress, a feminine voice comes from the bed. That was wonderful, Jan. You truly are one of my favourites. Can you send to the next when you leave? Typical Pauline, you laugh to yourself. As you exit her bedroom, you turn to the line of men and wink at the French officer who goes in next. In the ballroom, music fills the air, food is plentiful, and everyone is getting wildly drunk and dancing. Yet, increasingly, it no longer satisfies you like it used to. As a Polish exile, you dream of liberating your homeland. Yet here you are, part of Napoleon's army, on the other side of the Atlantic, trying to restore slavery. It doesn't feel right anymore. You guiltily spot Pauline's husband, General Leclerc. He knows what you've been doing, but he seems unbothered. Instead, he listens intently to Rochambeau as he rants about the rebels and the need for more brutal measures. You have seen his methods already. They bring a shiver to your spine. A hand claps you on the back. Jan, you act like the fever has got you already. It's your friend Jean-Marie, ruddy-cheeked and obviously drunk. Pauline will be most insulted to see you looking sad after enjoying her pleasant company. Cheer up, mon ami. Fear not, I will join the queue so I can comfort her. Suddenly, the music stops. You look around. see one of the French officers has collapsed mid-waltz. The fever has got him. The servants carry out the dead body, and the music resumes. Any thoughts of Pauline have been driven from your mind. You make your excuses to Jean-Marie. You need air. The ball is beginning to feel like a party of the damned. Your mind a twirling mess of images of home, of Pauline, of your friends lost to the fever, and Rochambeau's atrocities. You joined up to liberate, not to oppress. There's no honour in this war. Suddenly your mind is clear. You will join the rebels. The fate of the Polish soldiers sent to Haiti is a fascinating and also tragic one. Some of the most idealistic soldiers in Napoleon's armies were the Poles, who hoped he would liberate their homeland from powers such as Russia and Prussia. Sadly, half of those sent to Haiti would die from the yellow fever in combat. Others, like the fictional Jan, defected to the rebels and would spend the rest of their lives on Haiti. Despite their leaders having given up, the insurgency in Haiti raged on, and the French campaign became increasingly cruel. Rochambeau was given free range to repress the rebels, burning villages, using torture and mass drownings. He even arguably invented the first gas chambers for mass executions. He would put rebels into the holds of old ships and pipe in sulphur. Dessalines also earned the title Butcher of the Blacks in this period for his atrocities on behalf of the French. As the campaign increasingly went off the rails, all eyes began to turn to Toussaint. Fed rumours by both Christophe and Dessalines about Toussaint allegedly preparing to join the rebellion. Leclerc had him seized and deported to France as a captive. Sadly, he would die in 1803 in a French fort on the border with Switzerland. The great hope of the Haitian Revolution? His removal was a blow the country never recovered from. Then Napoleon would make a series of fatal mistakes that would truly doom his Haiti adventure. The slave trade was restored. Black or mixed-race people could no longer visit France without a sponsor, and also they could not call themselves a citizen. Then slavery began to be reinstated in French territories, one by one. When word reached Haiti, the population rose up in revolt, as thousands flocked to join the rebels. Even Dessalines and Christophe defected with their soldiers and marched on the Cap. A dying Leclerc, ravaged by yellow fever, began to descend into madness when he heard of the defections, concluding that French control could never be secured as long as there remained black people in Haiti. He wrote to Bonaparte calling for a war of extermination in which the bulk of the black adult population of Haiti would be put to the sword, leaving only children below the age of 12. Organising the Cap's defence, he was able to save the city from the rebels. But in his madness, he distrusted even those black Haitians who had remained loyal. Several thousand black troops still serving the French were executed by mass drownings in the Cap Bay, before Leclerc himself finally died from yellow fever. With the French position on the brink of collapse, Rochambeau was promoted to general of the expedition by Napoleon and given a final batch of 10,000 reinforcements. By now, though, Napoleon was tiring of his Haiti adventure and was unwilling to risk any more crack troops. Many of the reinforcements were convalescent troops and deserters, recruited in military depots in France. Others were reluctant foreigners that Napoleon saw as disposable. Despite this, Rochambeau was able to stabilise the situation by putting all his forces back to the port towns that were easier to defend, while the rebels controlled the interior. It was under Rochambeau that the French expedition truly descended into hell. Rebel prisoners were executed by the thousands. So many were drowned in the Bay of the Cap that locals refused to eat fish from there for the rest of the war. He also imported 1,500 man-eating dogs from Jamaica and turned them loose into the countryside to terrorise black Haitians. Despite his terror, all his actions ended up doing was turning the whole black population against the French, who were determined to drive them from Haiti once and for all. Displaying an almost suicidal bravery and taking huge casualties, the rebels captured the port towns one by one, until only the Cap was left. Then, a final blow Word came from Europe that Britain and France were back at war with each other. No more reinforcements were coming. Rochambeau began to crack around this time, and also abandoned himself to pleasure, with multiple mistresses, parties and balls. He even boasted of the vast estates and riches he had seized on Haiti, seemingly unaware that these all lay behind rebel lines and were now worth nothing. Dessalines was now in sole command of the rebels. Between him and Rochambeau, the conflict had become a true race war. When the rebels captured Port-au-Prince, Dessalines thanked the 100 whites who stayed behind to work with the former slaves. He then had all of them hanged as a message to the French. In this war, no parley was now being given. The struggle for Le Cap would be the final battle of this campaign. The town had been heavily fortified, with a ring of blockhouses erected on former plantations in the outskirts of the town. Despite this, nothing could stop the rebels. They descended on the blockhouses in huge human wave attacks, ironically for the French, singing songs such as the Marseillaise, taking thousands of casualties from French fire. One by one, the forts began to fall. Let's head to the final battle at the blockhouse at Vertières. As you march towards the fort, you hear the French trumpets sounding the alarm. On cue, musket and cannon fire fill the air. The lines of soldiers in front of you begin to fall. You keep going, clambering over the dead and dying. You won't stop until Vertières is yours. Your commander's horse is shot out from under him, but he just picks himself up, draws his sword and shouts, "Forward! Forward!" Suddenly, the shooting stops. The French drums roll out a request for a ceasefire. Nonplussed, you watch as a French officer rides out and approaches your commander. In a loud voice he shouts, "General Rochambeau sends compliments to the general, who has just covered himself with such glory." Then he salutes and rides back into the fort. This war is sending everyone mad, you think. Suddenly a bullet just misses your head and you dive for cover. The fight is back on. You rise and join your fellow slaves as you march on Vertières. You will be victorious today, no matter what the cost. The scene I dramatised here actually did occur. Despite vicious hand-to-hand fighting, Vertières fell. Le Cap was now doomed. Rochambeau opened negotiations with Dessalines. He was given 10 days to embark the remains of his army and leave Haiti forever. The war was over. The former slaves had won. Rochambeau and his men would be captured by the Royal Navy, and he would be a prisoner of war for years. Finally released, he would die fighting for Napoleon in Europe. When we think of the great generals who defeated Napoleon's armies, figures such as Wellington and Blucher come to mind. Yet it was two former slaves in Toussaint Dessalines who would win the most battles against some of the best troops Napoleon had. The Haitian Revolt has been somewhat overlooked until recently, historically. Overshadowed by the war in Europe, the fact that it was a victorious slave revolt also worried the British, French and Americans, and they didn't want to publicise it, for obvious reasons. Yet, it had a major impact on the world, especially on the United States. With his defeat in Haiti, Napoleon sold the vast Louisiana territories he held in North America to the US, doubling its size. If he had done a deal with Toussaint, which he could have done, America could have well faced a flourishing French Empire to its west, defended by former slaves, some of the best soldiers ever seen in the New World. Later, in exile on St. Helena, Napoleon lamented the Haiti expedition as a mistake on the scale of invading Russia, or the infamous Spanish ulcer. Yet the success of the Haitian Rebellion, and especially what came after, would also do much to bring on the American Civil War. Slave rebellions and the violence they brought would haunt the imagination of the planter elite in the American South. This would fuel their determination to keep their slaves under control. Despite their heroic victory, Haitians would not find peace and prosperity. Dessalines would declare himself emperor of the island, and led a genocide against the remaining white French population, though he also protected the British and American traders, plus those Polish troops who had defected. Like so many before him, however, He made the fatal mistake of trying to force Haitians back onto the plantations, mainly into conditions little better than the slavery they just escaped. It seems a curious condition of those who would rule Haiti. They would see sugar and coffee rather than human beings. He paid for his mistake and was assassinated by his own people to shouts of, "The tyrant is killed! The tyrant is killed!" Not until 1825 would France recognise Haiti's independence, in return for an indemnity so large it wouldn't be paid off until 1947. Haiti has continued to be racked by poverty, civil war, dictatorship and foreign intervention to modern day, unable to shake off the violence that birthed it in the first place. As I record this podcast in December 2024, yet another foreign intervention is being planned as criminal gangs fight it out for control of the country. Yet, what comes later shouldn't overshadow the heroism of the Haitian Revolution. Some of the worst treated slaves in all of the Caribbean rose up, threw off their chains, and beat the best armies that Britain, Spain and France could throw at them. That's an epic story, and it deserves to be remembered. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, or recommend the podcast to a friend. Currently, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we're now on YouTube, where you can see videos that I'm going to put up along with this podcast. I'm going to take a small break over the Christmas period, so the next episode should come out on the 3rd of January. I have a real treat for you. We're going to cover the Czech Legion in the Russian Civil War. Truly an epic story. Really looking forward to telling that one. Happy Christmas in advance to everyone, and I will see you next year for more Forgotten Wars.